Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Sideways. I didn't notice you'd been gone, I hear you say. That's because we weren't. But in this new season, we're going to be adding some new dimensions. Video, there's a new Facebook page, Instagram is coming, and who knows what else. We certainly don't, because we're still winging it after 6 months. This week, we're talking about what it would be like to go back and fix things from the past. Whether even if it were possible it would be helpful, or even desirable. Martin also makes a shocking initial choice as his favourite Doctor Who. Time travel.
Well, I wanted to talk about time travel.
Oh, fantastic. What, Doctor Who?
Who? Doctor Who, yeah. Doctor Who, yeah.
Who was your favourite Doctor Who?
William Hartnell, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he was black and white. He was the one that scared me most. And I think, and he was also in Carry On Sergeant, one of the earliest Carry On films. He was in there as well. So,
that surprised me. I thought when I asked you who your favourite Doctor Who was, you were going to tell me Sylvester McCoy.
No, I'd actually, if I'd have thought longer about it, I may have gone for Tom Baker.
Yeah,
because
of course. Everybody should go for Tom Baker, shouldn't they?
They should really. I used to see him in his dotage knocking around Headcorn. He used to live not far, and he used to come in for the book fair and that sort of thing. So, yeah, he was almost like a local celeb. So, yeah, I'd probably go for him.
He opened the door for me once in Marks and Spencer's.
Did he?
Yeah.
Did
he? I was coming in the back of Marks and Spencer's. He was coming out of the back of Marks and Spencer's, and he opened the door for me, and he said, "After you, dear boy."
Did you say I'm just going in to buy a long scarf? Because you'd never heard those sort of jokes before, will he?
No, I didn't. I went into Marks and Spencer's, and then later on that same morning, because I was with Beth, she was a baby at the time, I was in the opticians, and he was in there, saw me again.
Good Lord, he's sort of stalking you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably disappeared off for a few thousand years and just came back at that time, didn't he?
He was probably looking to buy a sonic screwdriver.
I was going to talk to you. In fact, the thing when I wasn't thinking about Doctor Who, really. I was thinking about Back to the Future.
Oh.
Obviously, one of the greatest time travel films of all time. Well, I expect you like it because it's popular, but you know, the normal people in society would have. It's an accessible film, and it's fun.
I do like it, actually. I think perhaps it's one of the exceptions to my rule. I do like Back to the Future. I don't think I've ever seen Back to the Future 2 or 3. There might even have been a 4.
No, there wasn't a 4, but yeah, you got to see 2 and 3. They're part of the trilogy. They're not as good as number 1, to be honest, but they've got their own quirks. Well, I see you as a sort of an Emmett Brown sort of character, a mad professor. Actually, no, I always remember.
You were the Errol Brown sort of character from Hot Chocolate.
No, I always thought your dad reminded me a bit of Emmett Brown in some ways.
Yeah, I can see that. It's probably the mad hair.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But it's strange because we were just talking about on one of our Zoom meetings, one of the Aspire to Be meetings. We're talking about time travel and various films and that sort of thing. And we then sort of got onto discussion, only briefly, and I thought about it afterwards, the meeting had ended, about, what if you could. What would we change? What if we could go back in time? Could we have made alterations, in the past to affect how we turned out, to affect our addiction problems, etc.
Right. Well, presumably you would. You?
Well, yeah. Well, I thought about it actually. So I started jotting down a few things that I could potentially have changed, and some of the things I couldn't. Okay. Some of the things. I mean, if you go back in time, you can't change, for example, your genetics.
Yeah.
So, I would have still. We know, the making up of an addict is a many-faceted thing, and one of the big portions of that is genetics. The more likelihood you are to have a fully blown addiction problems if genetically you've got a predisposition to it. So I wouldn't have been able to alter that. I wouldn't have been able to alter the traumas that I had.
No.
I wouldn't have had any control over that. So that's another big thing that I wouldn't have had better control over. Normalising.
Just on that point, though, generally, if we think about our ability to alter trauma, there's a distinction, isn't there? Because you're right, that we don't have any ability to alter traumas that have happened that weren't of our own making.
Yes.
there's a lot of trauma that we go through in our lives that when we reflect on it, we think, I was kind of the architect of that. But what you're talking about are traumas that are, happening outside of your control, right?
They are. And we get a big proportion of people coming to groups that have had traumatic experiences, either in early childhood or, early teens, etc., that weren't of their making. It's something that's happened to them. We if you look at things like child abuse or sexual abuse at a young age, bereavement traumas.
Yeah.
In my case, I wouldn't have had control over my brother's death, Paul's death, for example. Which, having said that, today would have been his birthday.
Yeah.
Quite, yes, he would have been 56 today.
Which is unbelievable, really.
It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, because of course that's the thing about. It's funny because we've never spoken about your brother. Well, I mean, you and I have, obviously, but we've never spoken about your brother on here. And I've never brought it up because it feels to me as if it's something that you should, if you want to bring it up, you should bring it up. But one of the things about bereavement when someone dies when they're young, is they're forever young, aren't they? I can't imagine Paul 56 because it's just not possible in my mind.
It isn't. He's still 21, and he'll always be 21. He'll always look the same, etc. Yeah, but that is certainly that trauma. There's nothing that I could have done to avoid that. And I know, looking back on things, that what a massive part that played in shaping the way I thought, the way I felt, and the way I behaved. So that I wouldn't have been able to have changed.
Do you feel like it had? Have you over the years got to the point where you feel it had a direct impact on your fall into addiction?
Yeah, I mean, some of the help. I know you and I have spoken about this, but also I've spoken to other people. Certainly, when I was in detox and that sort of thing, and other help that I've had, I could pinpoint the change in my mindset to then. Yeah, I went through a long period of self-pity. Why me, sort of thing, and the release to that was drinking too much. Really, it took away the pain, and it took away the pain. It took away the emotions I had to deal with, not only from a personal point of view, but obviously watching how badly it affected my parents.
Yeah.
And it was awful. It was an awful time. But I found that drink, and I didn't really take many drugs at that time. It was a bit of weed, for example, but it just took away the edge from it, really, and I didn't have to think about it too much. I mean,
you're when something like that happens in your life, you're forever changed by it, aren't you? And you if we were able to go back, or if I were able to go back and chat to you before Paul died, I'd probably see a shift in you. I mean, I don't recognise it now. To me, it's kind of seamless because I just know you like I know you. But I'm quite certain at the time I would have noticed a massive shift in you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was the architect, I suppose. If I could change something, I would have asked for help earlier. I would have done something about my inability to talk about my emotions. I wouldn't have wrapped it all up in my own head, and then self-medicated to release the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, you from recollection, my memory of you would have, or one of the observations I'd have made would have been that you threw yourself into work.
Yeah, I did. It was a big distraction.
Yeah.
And it was something that, I was just starting out on a career. I remember I was 23 at the time. So you're in a time when you are starting to crack on. You're starting to make ways. I'd got my qualifications in the insurance industry, and I was starting to forge a career. And it was a great distraction of becoming absorbed with it.
Mm.
But again, I couldn't have changed. I can imagine if people had a childhood trauma where they were perhaps in some way responsible for someone that died around them. But in my case, there was nothing I could have done about that, and so that was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And one of the other things, perhaps, normalisation of drink around me at home. I wouldn't have been able to have altered. And obviously, my dad working for a brewery, it's quite tricky. Alcohol was a big part of our lives. Even though my mum and dad didn't drink a great deal, it was always there. Every nook and cranny down in the cellar was full up with alcoholic beverages and stuff. So that was that. And I suppose the mental health issues, I suppose, looking back, it would have been nice to have altered talking to people about my anxieties at that time and the stresses that I was starting to put myself under emotionally. There's most of those things.
Just on that point, I don't know.
Yeah.
Even if you had the opportunity to go back, obviously, which you don't have, unless you have fashioned a time machine during lockdown, which I suppose is possible. It beats the mania for sourdough bread baking. But even if you did have the opportunity to go back, and this is something else that we've spoken about. People don't address those sorts of things until they're ready to anyway.
No.
So my suspicion is you'd probably find yourself back there and you still wouldn't be addressing it because you wouldn't have reached a point in your life where you were ready to address it.
Probably not. It's just it's a strange thing at time travel. If we're going back to the benefit of hindsight, there are some things I could have changed, but very little. Really, when I thought about it afterwards, after we talked about it in the meeting, I thought about it afterwards. What could I have changed? Could I have changed my peer group? There wasn't anyone that I hang around with as a bad influence, sort of drink or drug wise.
Yeah,
that wouldn't have been something I changed. Toxic relationships would probably be the thing in my later life that I could have potentially altered. Yeah,
but toxic relationships will have come as a result of something going on in you anyway. So unless you can change something about yourself, you wouldn't have prevented yourself from falling into toxic relationships either.
No, but again, with the benefit of hindsight, I'd have avoided those people perhaps. But then
you may have done. But what I'm suggesting to you is I don't think you would have avoided those people because until to me, toxic relationships are reflecting something to you about yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't tolerate being in them. So when you tolerate being in a toxic relationship, actually you're learning something about your own sense of your own value. Incidentally, if you did go back, would you have changed supporting West Ham?
Yes, with the benefit of hindsight. They've caused nothing but misery and trauma throughout my life. Really, I was thinking, could I, if I went back in time, could I not pick up that first drink? With the benefit of hindsight, knowing that was going to cause issues to me, could I have just said no at that point?
What do you think?
If again, with the benefit of hindsight, it depends, I suppose, what period of my life I went back to. How far back I went. But if I suppose if I thought if I start drinking, it's going to cause me untold issues later on in life, then perhaps I could have avoided it.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
That's one thing.
Go on.
That's one thing I could potentially have had control over.
Yeah, it's a very interesting debate, this, because controversially, I'm not sure you would have avoided picking up that first drink.
No, the more I thought about it, the more I went into these things of what I could have potentially changed, what I couldn't. There's very little I could have altered, really. I think that's what when I was writing out the list, there wasn't a great deal. I think the majority of what happened to me and the way I'm built and the way I thought and the way I feel was pretty much, there would have been out of 100% of what I could have changed. I could have potentially changed, between 5-10% perhaps, but it wouldn't have made a great difference to me. I think I'd have still ended up the same as I am now. Do you ever get people come sit in your chair and wish they could, a bit like Cher, if she came over, if she could turn back time?
I've never. Obviously, if I had worked professionally with Cher, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
No, of course not. Cher in the chair.
Yeah, if I had Cher in the chair, I'd have to keep that confidential. So any suggestion that her song, If I Could Turn Back Time, has any reference to the work she did with me is purely conjecture.
So do you get people think, if only I could just turn back the clock?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. I'm glad you said yes, because what do you say at that point?
Well, there's lots of things that I would
You
say.
Can't.
Yeah, you can't. So what am I going to do about it now? Oh, there's lots of things I'd say. Let me come back to that in just a second. So I don't want to lose one sort of thought I had.
Okay.
When you were talking about the thought of going back and being able to change things and the realization that there wasn't very much that could change. When you were thinking about that, didn't you also give some sort of credence to the conclusion that actually where you are now, I mean, I might be wrong about this, but from the conversations we've had, where you are now, you're in quite a good place in your life, aren't you now?
I have serenity.
Yeah.
I think I can't really put a price on that.
Okay.
That's for sure. But I've got a reference point that of being in such a bad place that any little move upwards away from that was joyful.
You might have had to do some really hard yards to get here. The experiences you've had in your life have made you who you are.
Yes, they totally. Yeah, no, I've been shaped by that. The base of our discussions were, we want to go back and change that shape. And I'm sure, people do look back and they have regrets. You as a therapist, what would you say to people that were thinking like that?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether you deliberately done this, but actually creating this subject this week follows on perfectly from last week's episode. It's about catastrophizing, right?
Exactly.
And so the root of anxiety and catastrophizing is time travel. That's where it comes from, because we create anxiety for ourselves by stepping back into the past and looking at all the things that went wrong, all the things that we did wrong, all the things that were done wrong to us, all the things that we wished could be different. And then what we do is we go away from the past and we step into the future and we think about the likelihood that they're all going to happen again. Oh, because all this happened in the past, it's going to happen again in the future. And so one of the things that I say to people when they say, oh, I wish I could, turn back time or change things, is I point out to them the futility of time travel. When you think back to the past and you're thinking about wishing that you could do something about the past, you're wasting your emotional energy because you're spending all of your time in a part of your life you can't do anything about. It's gone. It's happened. And so I would urge someone, if someone said, I wish I could go back into the past and fix something, I would urge them to think about what they can do in their life now that might help them get away from that feeling of a necessity to go backwards. Because you can't go backwards. I mean,
that's the perfect answer. That's what I wanted to hear, really, because I mean, it's this. My notes sort of pivot around about this point as well. About we know we can't go back, and again, we talk about it in groups about we have to move on. And I know you and I have talked about how important therapy is at this stage when you're looking to move on, and to be able to put some of those things behind you and to deal with those things that have happened and then move on. Because I always say that the best way to predict the future is to create it. I don't really like that phrase particularly because it reminds me of a when I used to work for Standard Life and I was going on one of these training courses up in Edinburgh, and that I remember a guy standing up and saying that, and I thought that is a cliche. That is such a cliche. But there is some elements of truth about it. But I really didn't like it at the time because it was all wrapped up in the corporate world, which I came to despise.
Well,
do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I do. And I think probably one of the reasons that would have frustrated you was because it was kind of it's like, it's empty. It's an empty phrase, isn't it, given in a corporate training session? So there are two things wrong with that to me. Firstly, it's corporate bullshit. It's like when someone's standing up and saying that, it's almost like this is the sort of thing you say to people to inspire them. But it's bollocks. Yeah. It's bollocks. Which brings me to the second problem with it, which is that one of our fundamental human needs, and this also goes back forward to the episode about catastrophizing, one of our fundamental human needs is the need to feel certain about stuff. It's the need to feel as if we have some sort of sense of what's going to happen next. There isn't any. None of us have got any sense of that. We like to think that we know what's going to happen tomorrow. If we look in our diaries, we'll say, oh, look, tomorrow at 10:30 I've got this going on Saturday I'm doing that. Usually it's staying inside at the moment. But that's what we think we're going to do, and probably for the large majority of us, that is what we'll end up doing. But you can't be certain about it. There isn't any. I mean, one of the things you mentioned already today, when Paul died, didn't see that coming. So, you can't see those sorts of events in the future. So when anyone says to you the best way to predict the future is to create it, is, well, bollocks, because you can't. You can do your best. You can try and put a foundation in place that gives you the best chance of creating a future that you want, but there's a degree of it that is always going to be in the lap of the gods, and you have to accept that.
There's one thing I just wanted to. It's quite a nice little quote that I like, that I came across that I quite liked, and it moves us on slightly from where we are in this episode, but it's by a guy called Henry Van Dyke, who was at the turn of the last century. He was an American author and a clergyman, but he said, he's talking about time, and he said, time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice, but for those who love, time is eternity. And I quite liked that, and there's a lot in there, and we could analyse it to the cows come home. But I just thought, the bit at the end about for those who love, time is eternity. To me, recovery is all about learning to love myself again.
Yeah, I mean, loving yourself is not big-headed. People who struggle with their sense of self, struggle with low self-esteem or poor self-image, tend to think of self-esteem or self-image as a binary thing. I'm either down on myself and hating myself, loathing myself, or I'm being arrogant and selfish. But actually, self-esteem, self-image is not binary. It's not black and white. It's a scale. And if you're at either end of that scale, you're in a difficult, unhealthy position. If you're grandiose and arrogant, that's not healthy. And if you're full of shame and hatred for yourself, that's not healthy either. Where we're all trying to get to is somewhere in the middle, where we are able to look with honesty at our faults and the things that we want to change, but we also are able to look at ourselves with care and compassion. And that is the essence of what it is to be in recovery. Not to let yourself off the hook, but to be loving and caring enough to yourself to get yourself through difficult times.
Yeah, I mean, again, that comes up a lot. We discuss that a lot in groups, and it's the sort of thing where we find it really difficult, especially in early recovery, to have any positive thoughts about ourselves, because I think we've spent so long in really disliking ourselves and other people telling us that we're unlikable, that it takes a lot of unwinding that, which again, I think therapy introduced at an earlier stage in recovery would definitely help in that respect.
Yeah, because I can tell you, even with therapy, it takes some people years to get there.
Yeah.
That's hard. That is hard to kind of change your sense of yourself when the only person that you have to listen to is yourself. It's almost like it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy that you don't really think much of yourself, but you're reliant on yourself to tell yourself that you're worth something. I mean, that's pretty tough.
It is tough. It is tough, and it's you're going back to that quote about that's from Henry Van Dyke that I was talking about. It looks at all the different perceptions of time. Time is linear, but our perception of it changes depending on what's happening to us and what frame of mind we're in. But when it starts off saying time is too slow for those who wait, I remember, everyone that comes into groups again just mentions how frustrated they are that things aren't happening more quickly, I should say.
Brilliant.
I was going to say quicker, and then quicklier came out. Yeah,
If it's a word, it should be.
People get very frustrated in early recovery because they expect an instant change. And it's coming to terms with the fact that this is quite a long haul thing. It's not a quick take a magic pill and you're out the other end again.
Yeah, one of the things that I've really noticed when I work with people in recovery is exactly that. Recovering addicts are like no other group of people for impatience.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the first things that I try and work with people on and try and impress upon people that in most cases you've taken years, probably decades, to get yourself to this point. Don't expect to unwind it in a fortnight. It's not going to happen. And actually, the other thing that's really important to think about with regard to impatience is when you are impatient with yourself to get better or feel, stronger or whatever, that's another sign of self-loathing. Give yourself some time. Give yourself some space. If it was if it was a friend that you really cared about, you give them the time, wouldn't you? You wouldn't say, "Oh, come on, aren't you better now?"
I'm sort of glad you said that you find that addicts are in a group of their own as far as impatience is concerned, because it's something that we talk about a lot, and it is something we all suffer from. But I'll the last little quote, okay, just to finish up this episode. But Albert Einstein, he said that the only reason for time is that so everything doesn't happen all at once.
The great thing about that quote from Einstein is he's reminding us that time is a man-made construct.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, does it? Only exists because we've made it.
It does. I mean, when I was looking at that, it started drifting into about about time travel altering the space-time continuum and all sorts, which is it got really out of hand. Anyway, yes.
Anyway,
so
just one final thought on time. It's important for us to remember that time, the fact that it's limited, which we complain about a lot, we feel like we're running out of time. I haven't got time. It's important for us to remember that the fact that time is limited is the greatest motivation that we have in our lives. If time was limitless, we'd never do anything because there wouldn't be any point. We'd just say, I'll do it tomorrow. So when we complain about running out of time and getting older or, worrying about that, we need to remember that it's the very thing that has pushed us on to get stuff done in our lives.
Do you know what, that's a better quote than Albert Einstein's.
Good. So are we done?
Okay. Well, I had loads of other notes, but I'm going to save them because it winds into other bits and pieces that we can discuss in the future.
Okay.
But, I am. Just before we go, did you watch that? What's the Matter with Tony Slattery?
No, I haven't.
Did you watch it on TV? It's a must watch. It really is. It's on the iPlayer, and with addiction and mental health being looked at there in a it's a fairly kind light, I think.
That's
but interesting.
We can probably have an episode on Tony Slattery.
We can. I mean, I've got all my notes on that because I did take notes as I watched it.
I'll tell you what, that's going to be flipping difficult thinking of a tune to do for that one.
Yes. Yeah, I think I've given you a tune for this week's one almost by default.
Yeah, I suppose you have really, yeah.
Yes, but which means you won't do that now. It means because you don't like to think that I've second-guessed what your intro and outro music's going to be.
No, I'll always try and find something that you won't think of.
Yeah, good.
Anyway,
I look forward to hearing it.
All right, Squire. Well, I'll raise a glass to Paul on his birthday. And I mean a glass of water, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, well, I'll raise a cup of tea. Thanks, Paul.
See you next time.
See you later.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Sideways was created by Graham Landy and Martin Pankhurst. If you want to read more about our work, visit grahamlandywellbeing.co.uk/sideways-podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. You can find us on our new Facebook page, Sideways Podcast, and you can email us to let us know what you think of the show or if you have any questions. And finally, we want to thank you for listening and ask that if you've enjoyed what you've heard, that you spread the word. And we'll see you next week. I remember long summers, and it felt good when autumn came. Jumping gardens in the moonlight, garden rakes that left you